Greetings all, this is Gerald Clark on January 10th, 2018. Today I'm going to present some research on Russian collusion, Zion theater, Pedogate, and the Bannon threat. So let's get started. Hillary Clinton, I abbreviate her HRC, most likely felt very threatened by Donald Trump, and I abbreviate him DJT, were he to become the US president in the 2016 election, in which he would have the power to subsequently expose her and the Clinton Foundation scandal. She had good reason to believe this. And here was a quote that Donald Trump stated, "I am going to appoint a special counsel to look into your situation." And this was done during the campaign when he did it on stage to her face. So she had good reason to be concerned about this particular process. Now, Hillary had access to intelligence assets given she was the Secretary of State under President Obama before Benghazi got to be too much and she was replaced. Her intelligence contacts would minimally be in the UK, the CIA, NSA, FBI, as well as Israeli Mossad. Here's a familiar name. The FBI agent Peter Strzok arrives on the scene as he was heavily involved in managing the data relative to HRC regarding the criminal use of unauthorized email servers handling classified information while serving as Secretary of State. And then Agent Strzok was tasked to manage a Russian Dossier research report looking for dirt on DJT and his contact with Putin. Why, one ponders? Was it due to the fact that she knew about the Putin-sponsored human trafficking list with her name on it? Paying $12 million for a Russian dossier by HRC is a lot of money for research report of this poor quality. Now this is, I'm referring to the version we saw that was only about 30 pages. Apparently there was more to it than that. So why did the dossier not contain information, the 30-page one, about the legal documents which were offered to the Trump team by the Kremlin lawyer? And this is the Velnitskaya. Okay, we'll get to her in a second. That was the smoking gun the investigation sought, after all, as the collusion investigation focus under Robert Mueller targeted the meeting that happened at the Trump Tower with the Russian dirt. And this dirt could have involved HRC plus others. Okay, we don't really know that unless you had access to those documents. But at this point, Trump was playing his hand and making it known that he had this information. Okay. HRC had to know from her intelligence network what Putin was up to regarding child trafficking and his disdainful public treatment of Zionist George Soros, whom HRC worked with closely. She had to be spooked by Putin's power to influence the election, using RT and the KGB and other implants, and potentially sway the populace opinion about her, a big factor in the 2016 race after the debacle years under Obama. Recall that Putin had previously banned Americans, this was in 2012, from adopting Russian children, not due to sanctions from the US, but they're related, and I'll explain how they're related through the Medjinsky fiasco. This is the premise that the Kremlin lawyer was sent to discuss with the Trump team, which was a cover story. Okay. Russian President Putin voices limited public support for Donald J. Trump via RT News, subsequently triggering the mainstream media to begin the attack campaign against Donald J. Trump. This was a preconceived ruse by the Zion media owners, okay, who own to make Donald J. Trump look like an outsider. Zion-owned media attacking Zion-owned president. What theater? In the meantime, Hillary Rodham Clinton gets very nervous. She knows about the Magnitsky Act used to punish Russia financially and the ban on adoptions used due to a hard-line stance in Russia over child abuse and trafficking. The Clinton Foundation specialty could have repercussions like leaks about uranium-1 or high treason. So she was really concerned about what Putin gave to Trump for these reasons. Putin appears to have set up the criminal cabal in America with the uranium-1 sting operation. It worked. They showed up with greedy paws, getting paid cash on camera as evidence. Gotcha. And that goes for HRC and several others. Oh, here we go. Okay. President Putin initiated laws to stop child trafficking in Russia, like any good leader would do, leading to banning Americans from adopting Russian children in 2012. Okay, there's more to the story than just that. The surface reason provided was for mistreatment and eventual death of a Russian child that was adopted into America. It appears to go much deeper than a single child's death, whether due to unwarranted U.S. sanctions and hostilities toward Russian President Putin and Russia in general, or due to the illegal U.S. wars conducted on behalf of the Zionist handlers, especially Syria. Russia appears to be leading a global takedown of Pedogate human traffickers. Knowing that your enemies are involved in dark activities that cross the red line for every parent, Putin is wielding some pretty heavy dirt over other countries' leaders, especially at election time. Okay, that and other times too, but especially if you're running for an election. Russia's President Putin, playing global chess, dispatches a criminal lawyer to meet with the Trump team under the ruse of discussing the Magnitsky Act and child adoption laws. According to the report, in his word, DJT did not attend the meeting to create cover and space for the dirt being shown on HRC. Could DJT have been on a list of sorts too for his blackmail dirt held over him by the Zion puppets masters? It was a good question. The infamous meeting summary is as follows. Here's the link to the article, if you want to read the full details about what this is really all about. Okay, also keep in mind, while the sanctions are going back and forth against Russia without any justification, one after the other, it seems that Russia was firing back too. So, here we go. In June 2016, a Russian lawyer, Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was hired to lobby against the Magnitsky Act in the U.S., set up a Trump campaign Russia meeting with Donald Trump Jr., purportedly to discuss altering the Russian Duma's sanctions against American adoption of Russian children, along with other illegal activities. That's interesting. They don't talk about what those are. Not just adopting children, there were other illegal activities. This is where the child trafficking snare comes in. On July 11th, 2017, Reuters US reported at the meeting that Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to Trump Jr.'s father. Donald Trump Jr. insisted that Veselnitskaya did not reveal any damaging information about Secretary Clinton, as his correspondence had suggested. Trump Jr. subsequently released to the public via Twitter.com his personal records and correspondence between the Trump campaign team and Robert Goldstone. Boy, that sounds like a Jewish name. A longtime business partner and friend of Trump Sr.'s, who actively represents several Russian interests and first pitched the meeting to Trump Jr. How interesting. Wonder what he knew to bring together a Russian lawyer from the Kremlin with Zionist leaders to give them a heads up that there was some trouble coming from Russia where they had trouble before. Could be. So I'm going to I was going to show you this video. I'm just going to give you the link. It's titled World Laughs at Russia Dossier, Team Trump to Sue Creators of Collusion Report. So if you follow this link, it's actually an interview of the Russian lawyer who was sent to that meeting, and she talks about the Russian dossier. It's mentioned of her name multiple times. So this is what they were after. Okay, excuse me, I have a little coffee here. The Clinton team wanted to know what Veselnitskaya had in documents that were being presented to Trump. What kind of dirt do you have on me? I want to know. Okay, now let's talk about Steve Bannon for a second. He's recently been railroaded, so everybody's seeing him as the evil bad guy as intended by the media. Anyway, I watched a little bit to try to catch up what there is to know about Steve Bannon, and I'll share a little bit of a different perspective than what you're hearing from Fire and Fury and all this treasonous supposed statements he made. So he was the chief strategist and campaign manager for Trump. Okay, wasn't some low level agent or operative helping. Okay, So he was like a chief strategist. Steve Bannon had to know about what was transpiring at the Trump Tower meeting. I'm talking about with Belnitskaya, the Russian lawyer. Although it was reported he was not present, the Russian legal documents with HRC's supposed name on them could be used to expose her and win the election for Trump team in 2016, then only months away. Okay. This election leverage dirt on HRC appears to be what was being offered to the Trump team from Putin via the Russian lawyer. Okay, this is why Hillary was absolutely hysterical. Probably she didn't know if it was uranium one or just what. The relationship with the globalists, especially Shomer Shabbat, Zionist Jared Kushner, now a family member through marriage with Ivanka Trump, probably led to a cover-up and removal of any dirt that would have exposed Zion control of HRC and DJT through the blackmail data on the Russian legal documents. Okay, this is speculation on my part that there were data on the documents about DJT as well as HRC. After all, the Zionists control both sides, red and blue, in Washington, D.C. That means both of them, HRC and DJT. Okay, keep that in mind. Steve Bannon is a nationalist, according to the Blackstone intelligence reports that I've been listening to. I can't remember the guy's name. It does that. It's on YouTube. Okay, look that up. Very well done. Very informed guy. And attempted to keep DJT on course to honor the grassroots populist party that voted for him. Okay, and I put DJT in there twice, but it's voted for him, and would have seen the activities with both the Zionists and with the Russian meeting exposing HRC blackmail dirt as treasonous, dangerous for the campaign, and perhaps alarming as to the level of outside control that was being exerted over DJT leading to the election. Okay, so now he sees Zionists pulling his strings and outside forces for other countries looking to influence him. Okay. For all we know, there could have been mention in the Russian documents about Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophile pals that fly via Volta Express to Epstein Island. This link would potentially expose, I just did it again, see. This link would potentially expose the relationship DJT had with Epstein, okay? It was significant. And he's a known pedophile for about 15 years. Okay, that's how long you knew him. I'm not saying that's how long he was a pedophile. Okay, this includes partying with him in his New York City luxury properties, where, according to documents, they were luring underage girls under the guises of making them models and then having their way with them, okay? One of the driving forces behind the human trafficking network is the customers that pay for it, okay? There are court documents online, and I can give anyone reference to these. Some of the legal trouble that DJT found himself in hanging with Jeffrey Epstein, including criminal cases involving 13-year-old girls that happened at multiple occasions. They mentioned 4 occasions in one document. Could this dirt have made its way to the Russian documents with the legal team under Belnitskaya as well? If so, then the visit threatened the very Zionist lid that Jared Kushner was there to monitor over DJT. If the Russian legal team had the right dirt on DJT, perhaps better than the extortion, monetary control held by the Jewish bankers, plus other dirt that they probably had, and the reality that they had married into his family completely, then not only would DJT, his run for presidency, be in jeopardy, the Zionist puppets would also be exposed. Okay, so Putin was playing advanced chess while the Trump team shows up without even a legal representative at the Trump Tower meeting, although Jared Kushner did study law at Harvard and probably convinced them that, and Bannon, that he and his crew could handle it. Now I'm talking about Flynn, Manafort, and Donald Trump Jr., the ones that were there in the meeting. Okay, well, guess what? They were wrong. Okay, so the Trump team responds to the Russian data. So a couple of scenarios were possible at that point. Imagine you're in that room and you're presented with something under the guises you're going to talk about the Magnitsky ridiculous act, and also the reason why children weren't being adopted in Russia. Okay, these were the premises they showed up on. Well, and then all of a sudden, they reached over and showed you the document, and there were names of high-level politicians on there for other illegal activities that were mentioned. Okay, like, I don't know, pedophile rings that were, and child trafficking that were involved with the Clinton Foundation. Okay, so
So they had two possible responses at that meeting. One was to expose the HRC blackmail dirt and let the legal process do its job, which would look political at the time, right before the election, but would not make covering for such a heinous crime an accessory by keeping quiet about it, okay? These are kids we're talking about here. Number two, the second vignette is playing out now, okay? And I believe this is what happened. Leak the data from the HRC emails using WikiLeaks for anonymity over the Russian source, okay, instead of just presenting the Russian source directly, thereby exposing the same issues presented to the Trump team on the Russian legal docs during this infamous meeting. Some of the and to have the same effect, okay, so they were used to have the effect on discrediting Hillary, okay, and doing much worse. Some of the leaks may have come from the nationalist and very concerned Steve Bannon. Okay, not sure. He was accused of being an insider leak for the email scandal and others, even though we know there was a scandal involving a Democratic member who was killed, Seth Rich, who was also accused of being a leak source. So it's not clear. Maybe they were both doing it. I don't know. So the bottom line is, HRC loses the election, all the while she has been shown to be involved in rigging it and is mired in legal morass, but has to come up with a way to keep this DJT blackmail dirt from surfacing. Okay, that was and like I said, she probably didn't know whether it was uranium one or just something else or just a multitude of things. When you're that involved with evil, there's so many low-lying fruit to pick from. Okay, and especially if DJT becomes president and decides to take revenge on her nasty campaign tactics, okay? So suppressing the Russian dirt on HRC and potentially DJT as well is easy, given the fact that the media owner, Zionist, that selected DJT for the presidency, minimally own him financially due to his excessive debt as early as 1997, and I did a previous video on this, and the need to keep their dirt on DJT private for extortion means later as needed. Also, if you have such significant dirt that you know about somebody and you're supporting them, you're kind of guilty by affiliation, so you don't want to let it out for that reason either. That is why HRC and her source handlers did not want the data leaked, as it would damage her election campaign for presidency, which it did. Okay, I mean, it was pretty obvious. Now, notice that not one time has it come up why Steve Bannon thought that the meeting in the tower was treasonous, okay? Acting on behalf of the globalist puppet masters versus the populist base that voted for you is an act of treason, it seemed to Steve Bannon, and I think he's right. This was clearly the setup with Jared Kushner in the meeting, okay? A Zionist managing the globalist agenda, but DJT stayed upstairs out of contact with the meeting attendees, his cover story being, whoop, I was not there. Notice the complete Zionist infiltration of the DJT family. How telling, just look at who they're in bed with, okay? So here you see Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, they get married, she converts to Judaism here. Eric Trump with Laura Unesco, they've had a child, or this one has, I can't remember, okay? He's still too young to have any logo next to him. But you can see that basically if you infiltrate a family to this extent, now let's think about this. These people have dual passports or citizens of another country. What? Imagine instead of these were Iranian flags, and we had allowed Iran to marry into the first family and be involved to this extent, and be dual citizens of another country. We wouldn't allow it. Why are we allowing these ones to do it? This is ridiculous, and it's so in your face. It's disgusting. Our presidents are not voted for. They're selected by Zionists, okay? Period. How else could you end up with somebody like DJT and Hillary Clinton running at the same time, okay? All right, I'll get off my rant. Well, this is kind of where WikiLeaks comes into play, okay? It seems to me that Trump is working with his secret agencies ruled by the Zionists. Okay, they were created for control of the government. These secret agencies by the Zionists to shut down HRC, in conjunction or working with Julian Assange, and insider leaks right before the election in 2016. This, in retrospect, seems what happened, okay? This is done for various reasons. First, to win the election with the introduction of a special counsel headed by Comey, a Clinton defender, and all the stuff that came up right before the election. He pardons her with assistance from Peter Strzok at the FBI, falsely. After being fired, James Comey drops out of the scene, but not completely. The FBI then brings on a Robert Mueller team to continue the investigation about the Russian collusion exposed by Julian Assange via WikiLeaks. And through all of that, we find out that Anthony Weiner, Huma Abedin, John Podesta, and the Clinton Foundation cabal, using the excuse of an unsecured email server, are being accused of federal crimes. Okay, of course, they're all walking free right now. All the while, this Magnitsky Act was made global by the U.S. Congress, further attempting to punish Russia and others financially with an asset seizure vehicle. Okay, 60 of them were put on this list to freeze their assets, both from Canada and the United States. They cooperated in this against Russia over Sergei Magnitsky, and I'll explain this because this is totally a ruse. This act may have been adopted to punish Russia and others financially, but it also put the Zionists in the oversight position surrounding DJT to provide media and legal cover to any of dual citizens of Israel from being exposed or included in the HRC blackmail documents, and those involved with the Babylonian-sponsored Luciferian child trafficking, a sin hated by Putin and his Duma, bent on bringing justice to the pedoverts and their networks. QAnon and the deep state takedown PSYOP. Okay, this one might raise a few hairs. So, you remember, I guess it was September, October, November of 2017, QAnon breadcrumbs leaked to coincide with headlines known a priori satiates the enraged wanting justice over Pedogate for a while. This PSYOP appears to have had multiple purposes, one of which served to delay the American anger and potential riots over Pedogate until it was replaced with some other distraction like war with Iran on behalf of Zionist Israel or with North Korea, which is happening now. Americans waited patiently to see all the supposed SEAL indictments acted upon, but there ensued no pedo walk in America. Even though the issue was a CIA coup to overthrow the Turkish leader, Erdogan gets points for showing how it's done. All those involved were rounded up in broad daylight and walked out in handcuffs and taken to prison awaiting trial. And this, I'm referring to this whole CIA coup against Erdogan that was conducted by a guy named Gulen. Okay, so he's in hiding in Pennsylvania on his compound, but he's worth billions. Anyway, if you really wanted to round people up that were doing horrible things to children, listen, as a leader, you can do this. And the fact that it didn't happen in America is the point I want to make. It's very, very disturbing. And all the QAnon hopeful for justice under Donald J. Trump found out the hard way that the agents of Zion are running his agenda now, not the populace that voted for him. And the idea of him taking down the handlers is ludicrous. QAnon was a PSYOP shown to be a fake affiliated with WikiLeaks' Julian Assange and the insider at a three-letter agency run by Zionists. A supplemental reason for the PSYOP may have probably been used to get a new list of patriots and breadcrumb following dissidents that could be dangerous to the Zionist powers that be. QAnon followers would be good targets for Soros-funded Antifa provocateurs during street protests. Just keep in mind, facial recognition makes real-time operations possible. Watch out, QAnon patriots. They could have your number and your face in a database now. Make sure you have your best image posted to Facebook so they can add it to your profile. With Kushner Zionist oversight, the threatening populists like Steve Bannon guiding a hopefully nationalist president like DJT are eliminated for Trump's team one by one, especially Steve Bannon, the last one. The Zion handlers used the populist puppet DJT to get him elected, but they have no interest in any national agenda, especially one that does not serve Zion goals. Steve Bannon is therefore dangerous to the agents of Zion, alive given the fact he knows the truth about HRC appearing on Russian legal documents, involving child trafficking possibly, and also knowing all the skeletons in DJT's closet guarded by agents of Zion for the right time to use it. He was the campaign manager after all, and when had a chance and would have had a plan to manage, he was the manager, but he managed any past indiscretions that HRC might dig up and use against him in the campaign, and we saw a lot of that come out. I suggest the time might be near to throw DJ2 to the wolves, as Jerusalem is in the bag as a payback to his friend Bibi Netanyahu, for his Zionist clan help in winning the election for DJT. And if you don't believe that's true, consider how much money he owed them, including over $1 billion, where he took himself out as personal collateral to these ones. What do you think they asked him to do? Well, this was definitely one of them. That's just my opinion, but I believe that's the case. Excuse me, I'm gonna have a drink here. Okay. The US dollar is in decline, and the Zion-controlled Federal Reserve is tightening its belt as a collapse is planned, but not before the overinflated stock market is pillaged and all the remaining silver and gold are in Zion control. The treasury notes they print are worthless paper, and they know the petrodollar is coming to an end. Okay. The question is, what will happen if DJT handlers throw him under the bus now? Will it trigger further unrest, possibly a civil war? I suspect they will start a war and drag the U.S. into it, full force, to shut down the Pedogate probings that are now going international thanks to Putin and the other nations that have joined suit in shutting down the global human trafficking networks. Let's proceed. And for those in the know, this horrific crime against humanity leads to the Vatican and the Pope directly. Putin knows this and has made public statements to the effect that he sees the Pope as part of the problem. Basically, and even with ClimateGate telling him to get back in his own lane. And I would not be surprised to see the Pedogate focus land square, the international focus land squarely on the Vatican and its control by Marduk Lucifer and his Draco child-eating alliance as part of the Dark Brotherhood. All one needs to do is read the Babylonian Talmud. Marduk was the chief deity of Babylon, while the Jews were held in captivity there for 1,600 years. Where do you think they learned to serve Moloch? Okay? All one need do is read the Babylonian Talmud, the revered book of Zionist Jews, and you will see how pedophilia, deviant sex, adultery, all kinds of lying, cheating, stealing, and perverse thinking is promoted against the Goyim, especially Christian children. Children that have been recently tortured and used in dark rituals serving Lucifer, Marduk, Moloch, affiliated with the Vatican pedophile cult, are being intercepted by organizations like the International Tribunal for Crimes Against Church and State, itccs.org. And I know the people up there, these are good people, among others. The Catholic Church has been legally designated as an international criminal organization that protects pedophiles. By this international court ruling, any affiliated members of the Catholic Church are subject to arrest by willing authorities just for being a member of this Roman Mafia religious death cult. And I'm going to stop right there, but I want you to see how high up these international probes go. And while we're on this topic, I want to do one additional thing. I want to go to a couple of documents that I called out to give you guys even further insight into what this whole issue with Magnitsky was about. And I'm going to summarize it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But when you understand what that was about, it ought to turn your stomach. So I'm going to go bring that up right now for you. Okay, let's go to start with the Magnitsky Act, okay? Just real quick, the Magnitsky Act, formerly known as the Russian-Moldova-Jackson-Bannock Repeal and Sergei Magnitsky Rule of Law Accountability Act of 2012. It's a bipartisan bill passed by the U.S., okay, and signed by President Obama in November 2012, intending to punish Russian officials responsible for the death of Russian tax accountant Sergei Magnitsky in a Moscow prison in 2009. Okay, so first of all, let's just stop and think about this. A Russian tax accountant being punished by Russian officials in prison, whether he died or not, what business is that of the United States? You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's kind of fishy in and of itself. So I looked into Sergei Magnitsky, found out the whole story about exactly what went down, okay? So if you go back up to the very beginning, there he is here, okay? When you read through this whole thing, He was arrested in 2008 and by the Russians. Okay, okay. And I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but basically, I'll scroll through here so you can see it. He was accused of being involved in a large-scale theft from the Russian state. Okay, that resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars being stolen and it was presented as a tax refund on behalf of the Heritage Foundation. So basically, it looks like organized crime got into this company, changed the documents in a way where they could get a tax refund and $230 million, which triggered the Russians to look into what's going on with Majinsky and this thing. I thought he was there to audit them, not to collude with them to steal money from us. Okay, that's what it looks like to me. Well, the really crazy part is that this money that was stolen ended up buying luxury properties on Wall Street in New York City. Okay, this is Zionist stomping grounds where they run DJT. So I'm like, wow. Okay, so if you really look into who the dirty money was coming through, I'll bet you there's Zionist fingers all over it. Okay, just so you know. So, and you know, Russia's been the only country truly to confront the central banking Zionists that take over countries using the rules of the precepts of Zion. Okay, it talks about how to take over countries and explicitly, starting with the banking and the media and blah blah blah. So Russia is a big threat to them. Okay, because they clamped down and threw them out in Russia, and now they basically set up their new headquarters in Washington, D.C., okay, and they have their puppets going on there. So anyway, so there's the link to what's going on. So make a long story short, several complex relationships of this auditor working through the Russian Interior Ministry. They track it all down through Hermitage, and basically he dies in prison after almost being in there a year. Whether he was killed by the mafia that was trying to keep him silent and not testifying against the criminals who took over this Heritage Foundation, or just what, but basically he ended up dying in prison, and then they were looking for somebody to blame for it. Okay, so that's kind of the background story on Majinsky, and the crazy part about it is if you go further into the documents, you find out that John McCain was involved right here. Okay, so you realize we're going back and forth with Russia and this Russiagate thing, and they're coming up with any reason they can to go after and sanction Russia. And that includes freezing assets, okay, of officials. Okay, so the people that were involved in putting Sergei Majinsky in jail for potential, and they don't even know it, never even made it to trial, potential tax fraud in cahoots with some mafioso people that were stealing money from the Russian government. Here, John McCain is recommending that they go after the people by freezing the people's assets in Russia. Now imagine, you're talking about overstepping your bounds. First of all, what Russia does with their criminals in their country is their business. So, so somehow McCain co-sponsors this Justice for Sergei Majinsky Act. Well, that tells you right there he must have been in cahoots with the Zionists. That ought to tell you right there. Okay, this is outrageous that a U.S. senator is coming up with some act on behalf of a possible criminal who went to jail in order to extort money out of Russia. That's essentially what it comes down to, okay? He ought to be the one in the gulag right here. All right. So, so I wanted you to get the lowdown on it. I mean, they went even so far on October 1st. He was posthumously awarded an honorable mention at this international integrity ceremony, okay? This is such bullshit. I mean, imagine a criminal died in our prison and Russia did this. And actually even having museum pieces put out for him. Well, look at this. A permanent exhibition with the title Sergei Majinsky, Witness for Justice and Democracy in Russia was opened at the Checkpoint Charlie Museum in Berlin. That, I'm telling you what. Now, first of all, let's just stop and have a sanity check. None of us outside of the courtrooms in Russia saw the documents related to all the investigation, which looks to me like it was done very detailed, okay, if you read through the whole thing. None of us have seen the full extent of those legal documents. So how in the world can someone like John McCain impose on another country a legal act from our Congress saying all you guys that were surrounding him, 60 of them are guilty, therefore we're going to freeze all your assets? That's an act. I mean, that is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. So now, keeping that in mind, that's why this Russian lawyer was sent to the Trump team in the first place. Is they wanted to talk about what the overreach that the U.S. Congress was doing with the Magnitsky Act. Okay, so essentially, when you go back to the Magnitsky Act, let's go down through this just a little bit. Okay, it talks about the background laws, individuals, factors. So basically, it ends up with a list of people that are on it. So the Obama administration first put 18 individuals on this list, and eventually it ended up being about 60, as you saw under McCain, once they passed the Magnitsky Global Act. Okay, so all of these people that were surround the tax auditor, okay, the people that are probably all Russians, not Zionists, they're the ones they're going after. Okay. Okay, so now the sharks have shown their fangs. Now what's Putin going to do? He responds. In response to this act, the government denied American adoption of Russian children. Okay, so it may have been a political reason. He may have done this for a political reason, but there was more behind it than what they're letting on. And they issued a list of U.S. officials prohibited from entering Russia. Okay, tit for tat. There you go. Okay, so then they talked about these Russian children, and this kind of opens a whole nother can of worms. Okay, we start to go and you start to go into this, and you start realizing that this international adoption in the United States was being prevented. The bill was unofficially named the Dmitry Yakovlev, a Russian toddler who died in 2008 of heat stroke after neglect by his adoptive American father. I don't know if any of this is true. Other recent developments include the proposition of a law to prevent U.S. citizens from working with political NGOs in Russia, and a proposition of a law recently banned preventing any foreign or from speaking on state television if they discredit the state. Okay, so he's talking about George Soros right here, right? Because they banned him from coming out. All right, so then Russia goes further, and they said, you know what? We're going to ban some people of your people from coming into our nation. Okay, and then so as a direct response to this Magnitsky list. Okay, so this is going back and forth behind the scenes, and all these people, and it's interesting who they were. Guantanamo Bay detention camp people, Dick Cheney connections, Assistant Attorney General, all of these high-level names. Okay, and then you go down to these ones involved in the prosecution and trial Russian arms smuggler and drug smuggler, both serving prison time in the United States. So they banned these ones involved in the prosecution of those ones. Okay, so maybe these guys weren't really doing this. Who knows? Okay, so here goes a whole bunch more people. And then we get to the Trump campaign meeting, which we went over, with Natalia being sent over in June of 2016. All right. Gives you a little background here about the people involved as part of this strike. Here's an interesting point. The Magnitsky Act, with connection to money given by Russian government to about 10,000 Russian human rights abusers, was addressed here. So this is going back and forth saying, you're abusing people in jail, you're doing this, you know. It's actually very much an overreach to be commenting on how people deal with their criminality in their country. I mean, why don't we comment on Saudi Arabia cutting people's heads off? All right, this guy was getting legal due process. All right, anyway. So this is going on back and forth, back and forth. More individuals on January 9th get put on this list, and these are even higher level people which froze their assets held by American institutions. Okay, so in December they make it global so they can go after all kinds of people. And then in September of 2017, basically a whole bunch more people were put on the list. Azerbaijan, Bahrain, China, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, Mexico, Panama, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Tajikistan, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and Vietnam. Okay, they were nominated for sanctions. That doesn't mean they did it. Okay. Looks like mostly they're just focused on Russia. Anyway, so I wanted to end with that and let you guys know that there was a lot more behind the story than what was being told, and I wanted to help bring some of that out. So basically you can see that the United States poked the bear. The bear opened up a can of worms on them with the global pedophile networks, which probably brought up some high-level official names in the United States. And then the Zionist handlers over DJT and HRC had to take control of the situation. Using their puppet John McCain, he comes up with a felonious act to go to make commentary on somebody being held in prison. It's funny that he was supposedly held in prison as a prisoner of war too. So for some reason this must have triggered something in him, and they used him to do this. They freeze the assets of 60 people in Russia to start a fight, and they should have expected that a lawyer would show up with some really heavy dirt, way bigger than that, which is what happened. So in a way, I was wrong calling the Russian collusion a witch hunt from the beginning on behalf of Hillary. Absolutely do not hear me saying I support either one of these candidates, but I'm just commenting on what I see. So there you have it from Seventh Planet Broadcasting perspective. It's Gerald Clark, January 10th, 2018, and we'll catch up with you guys the next time.